Hello to our News Club audience. This is Laraib Shahid Raja. I think this is the first time you are seeing me on screen, so I should start by giving my introduction. I'm the founder of News Club. The platform was founded about 4 years ago. It has since been doing really well, Alhamdulillah. I'm also a journalist who's based in London, and of course, I do hold a lot of interest in what goes around the world, but especially in the South Asian region. And currently, we saw a very brutal attack in Belgaum, which is in the Indian held Kashmir. So I thought this is the best time to come on screen and get some analysis into the situation. And to join me in the discussion is Hassan Raza, who's a legal and political analyst. He's also somebody who taught me back in the days. He's my mentor. So let's get some answers from him. Right, Hassan. So now that we know what's happening between India and Pakistan, do you really think there's going to be a war between the two nations?
Thank you, Larry, for having me. I think this is a very important question, and a lot of people are actually trying to answer that question or trying to find an answer to that question as we speak. But we have to look at the actions that have already been taken by the two states. So, what the Indian government has already done is that it has gone ahead and engaged in diplomatic escalation. Um, the Indian government has actually took a number of steps, which included sending back the defense attaches and naval and air attaches of Pakistan, and Pakistan has reciprocated that. The Indians have also taken a huge step with regards to the Indus Water Treaty. Now, if you look at the Indus Water Treaty, what they've done is that they've held in abeyance the treaty in itself. What is the significance of that is something that we can go on in the details of later on. But what we need to understand for that matter is that this is a step that the Indians have actually tried to take even before, but they have actually withheld or have not taken this step before. But now that that has been done, would there be a military escalation? I think if we go back and look at the way in which things have been for a very long period of time between India and Pakistan, it is it can be concluded that there is always a possibility of the military escalation taking place. But what is it that the Indians would be able to get out of? That is the question that we, or for that matter, even the Indians have to ask. There's not much that they can get out of now, because at the end of the day, they have actually utilized all the options that they have at the moment militarily before, and that has not really worked well for them. And we can go on to discuss that in more detail as we go ahead.
Okay, great. Now that you mentioned Indus Water Treaty a bit, let's explore it a bit further. What happens if India tries to stop the flow in any sense? What would be Pakistan's response to that?
Pakistan has already stated in its National Security Committee's meeting that that would be considered as an act of war. So that is something that would be responded to accordingly. But we have to understand that while I'm not an expert on Indus water treaties, I'm glad we've got a lot of them over here. But we have to understand that at the end of the day, it is not that easy for India to withhold the water for that. But it's not like that they have enough reservoirs or dams that they can go on to withhold the water that is coming into Pakistan for that matter. This would be a very huge task, a task that I don't think the government at the moment is prepared for. And it might take 20 years or so to actually stop that water from coming in. And is it even worth the cost for that matter is something that they need to decide on their own. But at the end of the day, we also have to recognize that India has been trying to renegotiate the Indus Waters Treaty with Pakistan since a very long period of time. Because they believe this water treaty, which was signed back in 1960, goes on to give an unnecessary edge, which is Pakistan, which, by the way, is incorrect. And they have tried to renegotiate it diplomatically since 2005. So I think when the tensions actually go on to simmer down a bit, the treaty, India would like to renegotiate the treaty with Pakistan. And by the way, the action in itself is illegal. It has no value in international law, because if you would look at the treaty, you would find out that the treaty can only be put to an end by the mutual agreement of both states. It cannot be done unilaterally by one state. And for that matter, using a term like the treaty would be held in abeyance, it doesn't work like that. It's actually against the international law per se. So in the future, it's a potential threat. We would continue to see it as a threat. As far as the National Security Committee meeting is concerned, it obviously goes on to address it. It said very clearly that any further development, which we can hypothetically say a construction of a dam or a reservoir, would lead to Pakistan actually utilizing all options that
Hmm.
to actually bring that to an end.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Also, let's move on to something similar yet different, which is misinformation or disinformation. Now that we see we are living in a highly digitalized world, social media, everybody has access to it. Before news channels get any information, people with a mobile phone have that information right in front of their eyes, and a lot of it is misinformation or disinformation. We have seen this in the past as well. Whenever something between India and Pakistan happens, there's a lot of disinformation at play. What do you make of it? What do you think? I mean, there's a lot of sentiments, of course, involved within Indian nationals as well as Pakistani citizens. And when it comes to disinformation, it only adds fuel to the fire. So, how do you make of the situation? What do you think should be happening here? And how responsible should a social media user be?
So as the disinformation is concerned, or for that matter, the misinformation is concerned, I think that is now becoming part and parcel of every global issue that we go on to see. But if you go back and look at it in the context of Pakistan and India, one thing that we really have to understand is that there's a lot of what we can go on to call, uh, you know, high sentiments or emotional sentiments across the aisle in India. And that is understandable to an extent because of the incident that has happened in Indian Kashmir. So they are actually pushing their government, and I think the Indian government is now also stuck in the war hysteria that it has created itself. They are pushing their government to take a stringent military action against Pakistan. The Indian government knows the cost of that action, because of which it has not taken it yet. That's what we can go on to assume. As far as the overall sentiment is concerned, I believe that would be something that the Narendra Modi government would eventually have to bring down. Misinformation, I think more than misinformation, what we are looking at is the war hysteria, particularly social media platforms.
Mhm.
That is something that can get the Indian government into action one way or the other.
Yep. And when it comes to reporting news, and I know you're a political junkie yourself and you watch Indian news channels as well, what do you make of their reporting style? And especially when it comes to Pakistan, what do you think?
I mean, there's a lot of theatrics over there. They engage in a lot of theatrics that matter. There's not much substance to what is being discussed. I mean, if you would look at the way in which their analysts go on to discuss Pakistan, they are unaware of the ground realities of Pakistan. They're unaware of the way in which Pakistan's defense systems work. So I don't think the Indian media, for that matter, or the large chunk of the Indian media, for that matter, needs to be taken seriously because of the corporate interest that it goes on to serve in India. And it has an affiliation with the Modi government. It's called the Modi government media, for that matter. So we are again seeing same kind of war hysteria being created in the Indian media. And that is something that is not seen, by the way, on the Pakistani side. I think
Yeah.
we're not as obsessed with India as Indians are with us, because of we have our own issues going on, and also Kashmir, or for that matter, India is not an issue that uh, is that can be sold to Pakistani public during elections, like it is the case in India. And we saw the Prime Minister of India actually going the very next day to Bihar into a rally. So I think these are the kind of things that are taken much more differently in India than they are taken in Pakistan.
Yeah. Just on a lighter note, do you think there's going to be a Bollywood movie on the situation?
I think based on the past, there would be one.
There
But
would be one. Who would you like
this
to
would,
see as the lead?
I don't think so. I have no idea, but I think I don't know the last time who was it, but they can put any lead for that, but we have to separate facts from fiction. That's
Yeah,
very important.
yeah,
Because
that's true. Great. Okay. Last night there was a little bit of a development, which was that India has involved Iran to send a message to Pakistan that they don't want any more escalation. What do you make of the situation? These are unconfirmed reports, but still are reports, and many are reporting on this. What do you think of it?
I think it would be too early to comment on any particular country, or for that matter, India actually involving a country to bring down
Hmm.
tensions. We have to look back at history to actually deduce what might be happening. We have seen countries from the Gulf as well as Iran actually calling up the foreign ministers on both sides. But we have to also keep in view the recent um, incident at Bandar Abbas in Iran, because of which these calls took place at the prime minister level between two states. But if you look back, usually it has been the case that the Americans have been very active in the region whenever there's an escalation between India and Pakistan. We're not seeing the same kind of involvement because of the reason that the Americans are already preoccupied with a lot, and they have got a lot on their plate already. I mean, they've got the war in Gaza, they've got the war in Ukraine. So there's a lot that they're already dealing with. Does that mean they're not interested or they're not following? Certainly, they're following Pakistan and India rivalry because it goes on to be a nuclear flashpoint. But it seems like that they are this time less likely to indulge or mediate that as they have done before after 26/11 or after Pulwama for that matter. And we have to understand that the intensity of American involvement at times has been actually very intense. I mean, if you go back and look at the way in which they were involved in de-escalating tensions between India and Pakistan after 26/11, their Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, so the president of the Bush, was continuously calling the national security advisor and also the ambassadors and all. We have not really seen that happen. And I think for this time at least, it looks like that Pakistan and India would have to figure this out on their own, probably through some of their Gulf allies.
Okay, so it's just India and Pakistan this time. Also, just briefly before you go, there's an Israeli element to the situation as well. There have been reports that there was some there was a plane landed in India, which were, of course, again, I need to stress on that these were unconfirmed reports. Uh, what do you think? How much Israel is involved in the situation, or is it at all?
It would not be surprising because Laraib, I think you would know better than me because you belong to the area. If you look at the fence that India actually had put up at line of control, that was a kind of a replica of what the IDF has tried to do. I mean, it would not be surprising for that matter that the Israelis are helping India for that matter in preparing a war. But we have to also understand one more thing, which is that the Israeli government and the Israeli government also recognizes that beyond a certain point, they would not be supporting India because they understand Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state and the largest military in the Muslim world. So it does not serve their interest to actually help India beyond a reasonable point. But other than that, I think in upgrading the fences, in providing them with some armament support, I think that would be something that the Israelis, for example, the other allies of India must do, as the allies of Pakistan. Because we have to also look at some of the upgradations that we have seen recently in our Air Force fleet. So I think that's something very usual when it comes down to Pakistan.
So now, Hassan, after this attack, Indian army came into action, and all around Kashmir, it has been very much patrolled by Indian army officers, rangers, and all their forces together. And we've seen a lot of arrests as well. A lot of houses are being demolished, according to reports. So, what do you make of the situation? First of all, it was the failure of the Indian army that those men could carry out that attack. But now, how they're handling the situation, not a single one has been apprehended as of yet. So, what do you make of this failure?
I think we have to understand the context of what is going on in India and Kashmir. At the end of the day, we have to recognize that the relationship between the Kashmiris and the Indian army is one of a colonized and the colonized. So, Indian army has been present in very large numbers. If you take into account local law enforcement agencies that goes on to cross even 500,000 armed men, they are protected by laws like AFSPA, Armed Forces Special Power Act, that goes on to provide complete impunity to the Indian army as to whatever they want to do within the valley. And if you look at it, the way in which they're demolishing the houses of so-called or perpetrators of the attack, I think that in itself goes on to show you the frustration that the local armed forces are having within Kashmir. We would have to actually go back to 5th of August 2019 when Article 370 was revoked and Article 35 was taken down by the Indian government in a completely illegal manner, by the way. What has happened since then is that the intelligence community in India is actually struggling to find local sources. And in any counterinsurgency warfare, it's very important to have people embedded within the locals or local people actually coming to the military, giving them information. That is no longer the case when it comes down to Kashmir. Because the military as well as the civilian politicians have actually one way or the other alienated the people over there. And that has also contributed to what has happened in Pahalgam, because Pahalgam is around 200 kilometers away from the LOC. So if you look at it, these people, even if they were, let's say, hypothetically infiltrated from Pakistan, they must have gone through that terrain on their own. Or if, as the Indian media is reporting, that they came to Pakistan in 27, the reason that they were able to go ahead and commit this act was because of the local support that they got. So the Kashmiris feel completely alienated from the Indian state. This is something that the Indians really need to introspect about. This is something that needs to be understood over there. This failure, for that matter, I believe at the end of the day, it was a huge security lapse because this is a tourist spot at the end of the day. And if you look at it, what has actually happened is that these people were around in that area for around 15 to 20 minutes, and then they escaped into the meadows around. And like you pointed out, the perpetrators have still not been caught, which goes on to reflect the failure of the local law enforcement agencies. And it is also something that the Indians need to actually get into in more details. And they've actually been trying to do that because in the all parties conference that they have, in which all the Indian parties were briefed about the incident, it was made very clear that there have been certain security lapses at their end. But counterinsurgency, because Pakistan has been dealing with counterinsurgency for a very long period of time in itself, is a very difficult thing to do. I think if India would do well to itself to revise Article 370, revocation of Article 370 and 35, as well as coming back on the table and discussing these issues rather than militarizing them further and further, because that's not serving any purpose at all. Even if they go on to militarily escalate further, the escalation ladder would no longer be in the control of the Indians. It would then be in the control of the Pakistanis, because you cannot predict the response of the enemy under any circumstance. So these are difficult times for the Indian policymakers, but I think it would be better to read to progressive voices, the voices that actually want India to improve.
Thank you so much, Hassan, for your time. And I hope to see you again with another topic another time. Thank you.